I'm Jonathan Troughton, CEO and co-founder of Frameplay, the world's pioneer in intrinsic in-game advertising. And I'm really excited to be here at the IAB UK Gaming Upfronts, and extremely excited to have sitting down in a fireside chat with me, Zach Stadlin-Robbie from Miniclip, the world's largest mobile publisher. But before we get into that, I'd like to show you something that I'm really proud of that we've accomplished over the last year.
In the UK, 62% of adults are considered gamers who play 7.1 hours a week, men and women alike, across all ages. Binge gaming has increased, and mobile phones remain the most popular gaming device by far. 2022 is shaping up to be the year of gaming. Current in-game advertising opportunities require gamers to pause the game, which is less than ideal when actually trying to play the game. The only way to reach gamers while they're actively playing their game is with intrinsic in-game advertising. Frameplay, the leading intrinsic in-game advertising capability, reaches gamers while they're actively playing video games, respecting and providing realism to gameplay. Brands are able to advertise exclusively to gamers playing premium video games because of Frameplay's trusted global SDK integration with leading game engines like Unity, Unreal, and other custom engines. With Frameplay's exclusive, uninterrupted intrinsic advertising inside of video gameplay, brands have experienced significant Comscore brand lift results with double-digit point lifts across the board in categories like mobile recall, likability of sponsorship in-game, and purchase intent, which typically see single-point lifts. Brands also saw incredibly low IVT results with Oracle Moat, which were well below industry standards and created transparency. Most importantly, brands want to know if their ads are viewed. Frameplay's industry-leading proprietary 3D impression viewability calculation evaluates whether the criteria for a viewable impression was met while the gamer is actively playing their game. With Frameplay, brands will only ever be billed for viewable impressions. As you can see, Frameplay's got game. So let's hear from Frameplay CEO Jonathan Troughton and Miniclip's head of ad partnerships monetization Zach Stadlin-Robbie about where intrinsic in-game advertising is headed.
Zach, good to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about Miniclip and what you do there?
Yeah, so Miniclip is a mobile games publisher where we make sports games like 8-Ball Pool, Football Strike, Ultimate Golf. And for myself, I'm the ads partnership manager, which means I manage our partnerships when it comes to anything monetization.
Awesome. And from what I hear, it sounds like it's going very well over there. Let's jump into, I guess, another question around how does gaming differ from an environment, from a digital perspective, comparative to CTV, comparative to web, or just general TV?
Yeah, I think so. For me, I'll focus on mobile gaming, and there's two main things really. It's engagement and accessibility, right? And so the main thing with engagement is that whenever you're playing a game, and I'm a massive gamer, is that you are fully in attention, right? Like you are fully immersed in that world. You're not looking at any other message or any other thing that's coming across your screen. And so that's a huge part of it. But also the accessibility part is two things really. One is reach, the number of mobile phones versus any other medium as an obvious aspect. But then the more sort of the different ages, the different countries that are playing the same game is massive. And then you multiply that by the frequency of use, right? So if I pick up my phone, play a game within a day, that is, 3 or 4 times a day, multiple games per session. So
on a low end.
On a low end, yeah, for sure. So from an advertiser's perspective, right, you're talking about an insanely powerful medium here when it comes to being able to really recognize, genuinely recognize from a data standpoint, even engagement and accessibility.
Look, there's several types of ad contexts when it comes to video games, and they could be interstitials, they could be banners, or intrinsic. What we're seeing is that studios really want to evaluate the quality of these new tech opportunities and how true they are to the actual gaming experience. So I guess what I wanted to ask you was what drew Miniclip to use intrinsic ads in their games?
Yeah, good question. I think there's multiple layers for this. And the first and foremost is our users, right? And we're always looking for ways that genuinely add to our users' experience. And so for our games, majority sports games, if we were able to add a branded billboard around the pitch in a football game, then it becomes lifelike in a way that it reflects what you would see on TV, right? And so I think for us, that's a really incredible way of making it as real as possible, or as relevant as possible. The other element of this is the commercial opportunity. And so from the publisher standpoint, this is an opportunity that is a very important incremental vertical for us. And so if we take our current advertising revenue as a whole, right, the significant majority of our revenue is made up of other gaming companies spending in our games. And the way that they do that is typically a cost per install model, which means as a publisher, we are effectively promoting churn within our games, right? And so brand advertisers, while that has been anyway a massive pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, is the reason why they haven't been able to win out as much is that they're being beaten out by performance advertisers when it comes to things that are ROI focused, right? So Candy Crushes of the world know exactly what they need to pay per user to be able to see a positive ROI. So while this intrinsic in-game opportunity is a really exciting one for us and for publishers in general, I think the bigger opportunity is for brands to start seeing the value that comes from gaming at scale by accessing this.
Would you say, sort of diving in, like double click on that there, would you say from the experience that the players are seeing, like when it comes to, you mentioned the word churn, or you start looking at session length or how happy people are inside the environment, are you seeing though that the intrinsic style of advertising is a very positive element for any of the players, and it's actually having a positive effect on the games as well, and in turn it's reflecting well on the brands?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a massive opportunity for us to create a native experience, right? So, and the more native it is, the more real it is. If someone's watching, playing a game in Poland versus the US, the difference there in terms of what brands they see will reflect the relevancy of that. And so, to me, it's it's a major part of what we're doing.
And so, Zach, to follow on from what we've just said there, one of our original concerns, and I know it was a concern for you and for Miniclip, is that the intrinsic ad style was not going to be disruptive. It was not going to break the experience. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that and what you saw and what Miniclip saw there?
Yeah, I think that for us, as I mentioned before, it's users first, right? And for us, it's really massive to be able to complement the user's experience. And so if we're able to add commercial upside while supplementing that, it's a real rare win-win opportunity.
Yeah, and for us, I mean, our core has always been to make sure that the experience is pristine for the player. And funnily, like as you say that, I'm thinking now in line with a lot of our ComScore studies, we actually see the same thing. We see very happy users from an experience, appropriate sponsorship or placement of ads in the style that they're going in, purchase intent, like all of this has really been reflected on the advertiser side. But it's really good to hear it from the game publisher side as well.
Love it.
I guess to execute intrinsic ads correctly, it's important that ad creatives work within the gaming environment. Can you elaborate on how ad creative can impact the overall gaming experience? Because I know ours is different to a lot of other environments, and we very much fundamentally said it needs to be different for gaming. So could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. And a great question. Great question. And to be honest, it's the most straightforward answer. People who love games, and I'm a massive gamer, I love playing 8-ball pool, FIFA, PUBG, whatever it is, right? Mobile console. It's being fully immersed in that world, right? Whatever it is. And so if a creative does not reflect that world, it is the best way to piss off the user and create a negative association with whatever that creative is. So there is just such an easy way to be able to, as long as you're in that world and it makes sense, it's the perfect way to resonate.
Yeah. And especially with intrinsic, when you, to your point, when you're actually inside of that environment, this is not an environment where people want to click on and be pulled out of the middle of their game and they're playing with their friends or they're playing with themselves. They're engrossed in that story. They don't want to be pulled out of it. That's completely counterintuitive.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the biggest part of it, right? Is that the more sort of lifelike it is, the more that we can cater towards that, the better.
So a question that we get asked all the time, I mean, nearly on every call, is, what games can I go in? And I don't necessarily think that's the right approach or the way to think about this, unless you're thinking about just contextual. Is it a sports game? Is it racing? So I don't know, maybe it would be better if you give your perspective on this instead of the actual company doing it.
Yeah, so I think it depends a lot on the brand itself, right? So apart from the obvious, don't put an alcohol ad in front of a child-focused game.
What do you mean, like a racing game?
Yeah. My answer depends on where is the brand in their journey. Are they just starting, or are they deep in optimizing spend in a specific way, right? So I'll give a macro response and then a micro response. The macro response is remove bias. Understand your goal outcome, what your barriers and objectives are, and then start, right? Like I've had plenty of conversations with advertisers that just didn't go that well until they started testing it and then saw how incredible the upside was when they saw how valuable gamers are. So I think that's a really sort of major aspect to that.
I think going into that, and just to sort of tap on that one, a lot of people don't really understand gaming as well as they think they do. And they start getting some information, some data in front of them, and it starts to reshape their entire world and their perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's from my previous job, working at an ad network or working at Miniclip, I've seen that happen multiple times. And to be honest, I get it. I get the understanding and the belief of what you think will work, and then testing what you think will work. And I think the latter is just massively important in trying to understand what's the result versus your KPI. So that's the sort of macro. The micro for me is within that spend, understand the feedback data of what's available, and continue optimizing and testing, right? So for instance, we have one advertiser, a very significant, one of the biggest digital advertisers at the moment, that's planning on spending via Frameplay. And they'll get a clear idea of the viewability, the attribution data, from that, see how that fits into their overall KPIs, and then start optimizing whether it's that ad unit as well as testing supplemental units. So things like rewarded video, interstitials, could be rewarded surveys, anything that sort of impacts the overall strategy. I think this is for me a massive part of not just making sure you tackle one target, but multiple targets when it comes to gaming.
All right, into I guess a more of a meaty question here. What's your take on Frameplay's philosophy on deploying programmatic buys? Because we know that we've done things differently, and we've done it for a very good reason when it comes to brand safety, especially inside of games, and making sure that that environment is also safe. But some of the differences here, and while we go through evolving and solving each of these problems, some of the differences of just understanding what type of device something's going to and the device capabilities, and making sure that gameplay is fluid and smooth requires some, I guess you'd say, tweaks to the programmatic landscape. And we're not naive in thinking that we don't need to have programmatic built out in a very interoperable manner, and that is measurement and viewability and attribution. We get all this. But the way we're approaching this for gaming, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so it's creative around this is a very, very important question. And so the foundation from our end is brand safety, right? Like brand safety for us, when we talk about full screen video, which is majority of our advertising revenue, is open programmatic, right? It's open real-time bidding, and it's keyword driven. So an alcohol ad, a gambling ad, all that kind of stuff is keyword driven. So every once in a while, I'm talking once every 6 months, we might get an ad that comes through that we will not accept. When it comes to in-game advertising, the tolerance is zero, right? We're talking about a wrong ad inside of our actual gaming experience. And at that point, it becomes the foundation. So that to me is the most, it's the most important element of this, and we have to focus on that before we then begin thinking about the upside of what this looks like and everything else. When we start looking at that, then it becomes, a different ball game.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining us for the IAB UK Gaming Upfronts. And a very big special thanks to Zach and Miniclip, the world's largest mobile publisher, for joining today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate everyone tuning in, and thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
And on that, I'm going to leave you now with some exciting exclusive video of what Frameplay's got coming up next.
You've heard about how Frameplay has set the standard for intrinsic in-game advertising with exclusive premium games, programmatic buying, trusted measurement, and industry-leading 3D viewability. Now, let's talk about what's to come. Frameplay is already the leader in intrinsic in-game advertising for mobile, which is the #1 gaming device in the world. We're constantly adding more premium mobile games to our inventory on a monthly basis. We're also proud to announce our post-beta launch of our integration with Kochava's leading view-through attribution capability, enabling impression-to-conversion measurement for performance marketers. Our early results were incredible, and any MMP can use Frameplay's VTA solution to measure impression-to-conversion attribution for their clients' brands. Now, for the moment you've all been waiting for. Here's an exclusive first look at Frameplay's upcoming premium gaming inventory. Nitro Nation is all about multiplayer racing. Choose from hundreds of vehicles like supercars, tuners, street racers, classics, and muscle cars as you compete on the streets or in tournaments with your crew to work your way up the leaderboard. Tee off in Ultimate Golf, a free golf game with real courses, real-time multiplayer duels, and tournaments. Like a true pro golfer, perfect your swing to drive, chip, and putt from an endless variety of lies on the fairway and greens. Basketball Stars allows you to compete one-on-one in 2 awesome multiplayer modes. Basketball on a mobile device has never looked this good, with fully customizable 3D players and a variety of environments to play in. Ping Pong Fury is the ultimate one-on-one real-time multiplayer battle. Players can also practice each shot and try out high-end equipment in the game's training mode. This is table tennis like you've never seen before. We look forward to all that's to come. Now, let's get your brand in the game.
Jonathan, thank you so much. It was a brilliant session, and thank you for joining us now. We couldn't get you here in person, but we have got you down the line all the way from New York. And I assume you can hear me. Nod, wave, if that's the case.
Yeah, no, I can hear you, James. And as you can see, I've done another teleporting act, and got a bit of an echo as well.
Well, it's kind of you to wear the same T-shirt because it makes it a lot easier. Makes it a lot easier for me.
I went out of my way to do that.
Let me ask you about this question on authenticity, because you kind of hear it again and again. It's so important that you get it right, only because these environments are so immersive and they are so native. But give me your point of view on authenticity and where you think the industry's at.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We get posed this all the time, especially because we're doing things differently. And when you're doing things differently, you get a lot of pushback in the beginning. But when you're really taking a perspective of a gamer or a publisher, and you really want to make sure that experience is true and authentic, and I think Zach even touched on that as well, and you're authentic to the experience of the player, you have to do things differently. We can't just be taking the existing assets that popped up at some news site somewhere around the world. You need to be creating creative that's relative to the gaming environment. And when you go as far as actually thinking around, what's the capabilities of a cheap device versus a really expensive device and their connection capabilities, and you're thinking about a fluid experience, if you're maintaining 60 frames a second even on a mobile device, you really need to start thinking about how to do things differently. And that's where the shakeup really comes. And we focused a lot on making sure everything's interoperable and that the differences are very slight, but the experience and the difference for the player is astronomical. Like, it's a totally different realm. And if you break this experience for gamers, it will come back in the brand, it will come back in the game, and that's nothing we want for any of our clients.
We're talking a lot over the next 3 weeks for Upfronts about what people are getting excited about for 2022. What's got you excited about what's to come maybe next year and the years after that?
Yeah, look, I think we're notoriously tight-lipped, and it's maybe known or in the small circles that we have in this realm. We are releasing some really interesting things, let's just say that much. In Q1, there'll be new platform releases as well, and we'll leave it at that for now.
We've got one question as well, just while I've got you, Jonathan. We've got a question from the audience. Clients always have issues regarding barriers to entry. How do you tackle this challenge in terms of creative? Is it something you're hearing again and again?
It was something we heard at first. The creative being different, and they couldn't just, I think I just touched on this. We did hear this very early on, where basically the creative is different. Why can't we just use our existing, IAB web formats? And how well do you think a 300 by 200 pixel image goes in a 4K resolution environment? Not great. So early on it was re-education, and I was really talking to the clients, the brands, and saying, hey, do you want to look good in front of these people? Do you want to be completely authentic in an intrinsic way to the game, and do you want to connect to them? And that requires you to think of creating creative that's slightly different. We do it with them, we do it for them, but the results have been phenomenal. You look at any of the brand lift studies we've done, ComScore, etc. The numbers are massively off the chart, and that really comes back to being authentic to the experience.
These things just seem so simple, but there's all sorts of reasons why we don't quite get them right. Jonathan, brilliant to talk to you. Thanks for a fantastic upfront, and thank you for getting up in what's morning for you and joining us for a couple of minutes afterwards. I really appreciate it.
Well, welcome. Glad to be here.
Cheers.